I have a favorite Seth Rogen movie. I mean, I wrote a lot of the movies that I made, so it's an egocentric or question to ask me. I have to pick one that I didn't write or direct just to make myself not look like an asshole. The 40-Year-Old Virgin. Cal, is that my character's name? Cal, C-A-L, Cal. I play a guy who's a novelist a struggling novelist who works in a Best Buy. It's called Smart Tech in the movie. Yeah, I covered myself in fake tattoos for that movie. It's because I went to a Best Buy. I don't do a ton of research, generally speaking, but I went to a Best Buy to kind of see if there was anyone I could base my character on, and a lot of guys there were tatted the fuck up, and I was like, oh, that's a funny thing for just in general, to be buying a stereo from a guy with really scary tattoos all over him. Had a lot of good band shirts. I work a lot from the outside in, as you could see. Tattoos, t-shirts, these are the things I base my characters on. But yeah, I had a Liquid Swords t-shirt in that movie. I think I wore a Nirvana, a Nevermind t-shirt, and maybe a Sonic Youth t-shirt as well. There was a lot of good t-shirt work in that film. Some of my finest t-shirt work.
That was your first major motion picture that you were in, right?
It was. I had a small part in this movie, Donnie Darko, and Anchorman was maybe before that. But yeah, that was 40-Year-Old Virgin was for sure my first role. That was you would go to the movie and remember who the fuck I was, basically. It was great working with Steve Carell. I really had the sense, I got the sense he was uncomfortable with how dirty the movie was. And it's funny because, if you look at his career beyond that film, he never made another movie like that in any way, shape, or form. He really, he changed direction. That movie is, kind of an anomaly.
God, sorry I'm late, man.
Oh, no problem.
Oh, man. I had a weekend.
Yeah.
We went to Tijuana, Mexico, and we thought it'd be fun, to go to this show. Everyone's, you got to check out one of these shows. And, it's a woman fucking a horse. We get there, and, we think it's going to be awesome, and it is not as cool as it sounds like it would be, man. It's kind of gross.
Yeah.
You think a woman fucking a horse, and you get there, and it's a woman fucking a horse.
Yeah.
It was really giving it to her. And you know what? To be honest, I felt bad for her. We all just felt bad for her.
Yeah.
Kind of felt bad for the horse.
Wow, that's something.
It was funny because it kind of reflected the dynamic in the movie where we were this filthy force in the life of this guy who's kind of pristine. There's a scene where Steve Carell gets his chest waxed and we waxed him for real.
Cool. This is the one right here, right?
Hi, how are you?
So this is your first time getting body waxed?
Yes, it is.
Take off your shirt.
Okay.
Oh, we're gonna need more wax!
I'm staying. This is going to be good.
And we had to just stand there and watch it. And it was pretty fucked up. And he started bleeding.
So ready?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Oh, you fucker! Oh, I'm sorry. That's just your job. Huh?
Just stop now.
No. That's okay. Let's do another.
That one little patch looks sexy, though.
Does it look good?
Yeah, it looks really good.
I remember that was a mission. I was a co-producer on the movie, so I would get writing assignments. And I remember one of my assignments was to make things for him to scream as he was getting waxed so he didn't have to think of it.
Fuck me in the asshole!
And I was supposed to be making a dirty list and a clean list. And I remember the dirty list was easy and the clean list was hard. And I remember I couldn't think of anything. And American Idol was on, and it was the year Kelly Clarkson was on. And I wrote Kelly Clarkson.
No, Kelly Clarkson!
I wrote it as just something to fill the page so Judd wouldn't yell at me, but it turned into a line that people still remember. I remember there was a lot of discussion of how do we show the joy he has after losing his virginity. I remember Carell was like, I should just sing Age of Aquarius. And we were like, oh, that's a very funny idea.
When the moon is in the 7th house and Jupiter aligns with Mars.
There's a part where it's me and Jonah and Mindy Kaling actually dancing together.
Harmony and understanding
sympathy and trust abounding. Jonah got heat stroke that day, for real. Yeah, I think he had to go to the hospital. It was fucked up. Because he's wearing like a poncho and a hat, like a winter hat. And it was like 115 degrees and we were in like Temecula or some shit. Superbad. Me and Evan Goldberg, my friend and partner to this day, started writing Superbad when we were in high school. We were in 8th grade, basically. And it incorporated a lot of our like real life high school stories. And originally, I mean, the characters' names are Seth and Evan, after me and Evan. And originally, I was going to play Seth, and we would hire another actor to play Evan, who the real Evan has no interest in acting. But it basically took us so long to get the movie made that I like aged out of the role, essentially. And like we were like 24 by the time we were making the movie, and I could not play 18-year-old convincingly anymore. So I played this cop that was always in the script, and I much more convincingly played like a guy in his late 20s who was a really irresponsible cop than a guy who was in his late teens who was about to enter college. And so Jonah Hill played the role I was originally going to play to much better effect than I ever could have played it, and Michael Cera played Evan. And it's funny because Michael Cera's really not like the actual Evan in real life, but he was perfect, and he's just a genius, and he really, in the script it was kind of like a straight man and a funny guy, but he made the straight man just as funny as the funny guy, which was like something that I've really grown to marvel at over the years. We found Jonah because he's actually originally a 40-year-old virgin, and that was a scene I had written.
So I guess I'll just give you some money, and you can give me these shoes, and...
You know, I know, it seems so strange.
Yeah, so I'd just rather buy them from you, straight up.
Yeah, I know, I wish it could be that easy, but...
I wish too, but you're making it extremely difficult for me. I'm just trying to get these shoes back to my house so I can wear them.
She works in this sell your stuff on eBay store, which was a thing at the time, which makes no fucking sense. And I remember I was like rewriting the scene with Judd, and I had this idea where this guy comes in and tries to buy these boots and just doesn't fucking get it. And then I was in a movie theater seeing The Life Aquatic. And I felt a tap on my shoulder, and it was Jonah. And he was like, "You don't know me, but I'm auditioning for this role in a movie that you're a producer on next week." And he explained the role, and I was like, "Oh, that's so funny. I wrote that role a few weeks ago. That's great." And he came in, and he was like brilliant. It was like one of these like moments where you're just like, "Oh, this guy's like fucking leagues funnier than most people you encounter." When we were making Knocked Up, we literally were like, Jonah, like he's just brilliant. And then he kept on trying to convince us to put him in Superbad, and we were just like, "No, like you're too old." And we thought he was too old. And then I remember literally one day we like had him come to like into my trailer during Knocked Up and like filmed him on like a camcorder.
I could be allergic to pussy juice. I don't know. I've never tried it. And you haven't, but the fucking drought's over. The floodgates are opening. We're gonna need to build a dam to stop the pussy juice from overflowing onto us.
You're right.
That's graphic.
And it was just so funny. We were like, "Oh, we were wrong. Like he can totally do this very well." And then we put him in the movie. So I was in this movie called You, Me, and Dupree, which is like not a fantastic movie. It was actually directed by the Russo brothers, though, who went on to go direct all the Avengers films and become by far the most successful filmmakers of all time. But my friend in the movie was Bill Hader, who it was his first season on Saturday Night Live. Like he had been in a few episodes when we were filming it, and he was so funny. And I literally remember meeting him, and after a couple days, being like, we were already going to be making Superbad, and we were like, "You should be the other cop with me in the movie."
Whoa! Holy shit, were you just getting laid?
No. Yeah, I was, but...
Yes, yes, he was.
That's not what you think, guys. I'm not even...
Sit the fuck down. Stay there.
Calm down.
I thought we were friends, and then you go running away from me.
Contain yourself.
We're friends.
Shut up.
Why?
Calm down, man. What? You just cock-blocked McLovin. Okay, he's our friend. We don't do that. We should be guiding his cock, not blocking it.
There's a scene where they're like the youngest guys at like a party full of older guys who start doing coke.
Who's that guy? Hi.
Who is that guy? Who's this guy?
Hey, fellas. Hi.
That happened to me and Evan. I did stand-up comedy as a kid, so I would hang out with the stand-up comics sometimes when I was like 16. And one time we went to a party at one of their houses and they all started doing coke, and we wound up in a room with these guys who were very threatening towards us. It was a lot like the scene in the movie.
Sing for us. Sing.
Oh, it's not me?
No.
You fucking lying?
I don't mean to, accuse you guys of being ill-informed.
My brother came all the way from Scottsdale, Arizona to be here tonight. And you're not gonna sing for him?
Fucking bullshit.
Sing.
You're a fucking singer.
You sing, and you sing good.
Sing it again.
Like a bird.
No, I know. I want to.
You want a line of cocaine?
No way, man.
Yeah.
The period blood also happened. We were at a high school dance, and we were in the locker room afterwards, and it essentially played out almost exactly like how it does in the movie.
Dude, is that blood?
What the fuck is that?
Are you bleeding?
I'm not cut or anything. Why would I be bleeding?
It's fucking blood, man. Are you dancing with some chick in there?
Yeah, so?
It's blood. Dude,
Yeah, we were in the locker room and we saw this watch on a guy's pants, and we were all kind of like trying to figure out what it was, and we were like, dude, were you drinking wine? Like what? Like, and then we noticed like another group of guys in the other corner of the locker room having the exact same conversation, like looking at this watch on their pants, being like, what is it? Like, what did a pen explode in my pocket? Like, what happened? And then because there was two, we saw each other from across the locker room, and we were like, and like we cut a piece together what happened. You can't think of that. That has to happen, yeah. Freaks and Geeks. It was my first role. That was my first role. I played Ken Miller, who was like a gearhead kind of guy who did a lot of drugs and was probably going to amount to very little in his life in Michigan in the early 80s. Yeah, it was the first time I really ever like spoke on camera or acted or anything like that. I remember I'm very awkward. You can chart like my acting progression as the show goes on for sure, and I like get much better as it goes on, and it culminates in a pretty like strange but great episode where the girl I'm dating tells me she was born a hermaphrodite, and it's dealt with like very kind of touchingly and sincerely, which especially at the time was pretty progressive, I guess. I mean, it was it was, or at least original.
I mean, I was born with both male and female parts.
Uh-huh.
My parents made a decision with the doctors that I should be a girl. I mean, thank God, because that's who I am. But it's still a really big part of my life. And I thought you should know.
No, this is good that you told me this.
I had a great time doing that show, and I still work with a lot of those same people today. I just saw Martin Starr literally at my house 2 days ago. And so, we lived together after that show. So I was the age of the geeks, even though I was a freak. So I hung out with the geeks. I hung out with Jason Segel a lot also. I became friends with Franco not years later, actually. We didn't hang out much.
You guys weren't hanging out on the show?
No, we didn't hang out during the show. I wasn't sure about him, and it wasn't until honestly like 7 or 8 years later that we kind of became friends again. Yeah.
What was working with Judd Apatow like then?
Back then, it was interesting. I mean, he was young and he worked really hard, and he was very passionate about it. He was not always the most sensitive with the actors. I remember on Undeclared, he would boo us off camera if he didn't like what we were doing. You would just hear from the other room, boo! And we're thinking like, that's maybe not the best way to be approaching actors and direction, but you know what? I was 18, so I just took it. Stop. Me and Evan Goldberg, my writing partner, had a lot of like very strange ideas. That kind of went on to become movies like This Is the End and Sausage Party and Pineapple Express, but at the time, Judd was like, we just need to do something simple, like something that is just like relatable and just like you get instantly. And I almost think like conversationally one day he was like, we just make a movie about you like getting a girl pregnant. And that was kind of it. And I was a little nervous about being a leading man. I was pretty cocky when I was younger though. So no, I look back and marvel at how little self-doubt I had in comparison to now, which I'm just riddled with it. we incorporated a lot from my real life into that. Like, well, first of all my actual friends played my actual friends and roommates, and I had lived with, I think, half the people who played my roommates in the movie at one point or another. It was Jonah Hill and Jason Segel and Martin Starr and Jay Baruchel. And then the way we lived, the furniture, a lot of that shit. Literally, the couch was Evan Goldberg's couch. The coffee table was his coffee table. In my apartment in the movies, they were my paintings that I had literally painted, that Judd took and put on the walls of my apartment in the movie.
So you think you'll do it again?
No way. She was totally repulsed by me.
What?
She just really didn't seem to like me. Like, she wasn't laughing at my jokes. I mean, I'm like a funny guy.
Fucking funny.
Hilarious,
balls.
man. I was giving her the A shit. Nothing.
It was a lot from our real life. There's a joke where Martin is having a competition to see how long you can go without shaving.
Martin, all right, listen. You don't shave your beard or cut your hair for 1 year, and if you can do that, I will pay your rent. But if you shave, then you have to pay all 5 of our rents. Thanks for the free money, bitch.
That was a thing that we would do with our friends. That movie, I mean, a lot of our movies are inspired by our real lives, but that one took a lot from what we were going through, like, at that moment and put it right into the movie. Me and Katherine Heigl got along really well while we were making the movie. I thought she was hilarious, and we seemed to have a good dynamic.
You should just support me. You know, you should just support everything I say, because at this juncture in my life, I'm allowed to be wrong.
So if you're wrong, I have to support
Yes.
it? I can't tell
Yes.
you that you're
No.
acting like a lunatic?
No.
No. Okay.
Oh, that's helpful. You have to do nothing.
I've
You just have to
sacrificed a
fucking
lot of
sit
shit
here.
to
You haven't
do this.
sacrificed
I haven't.
anything.
No,
I've had
I
to
haven't.
sacrifice my job, my body, my youth, my vagina.
Really, like, a lot of the movie is us fighting and yelling at each other, and she really was a good fighter, and it made for what I thought was a funny dynamic. Pineapple Express. I played Dale Denton. Originally, again, when we wrote Pineapple Express, I was supposed to play, in our heads, I was going to play Saul, the drug dealer, and we would get like a more conventional leading man to play Dale, like Franco. And then we started to think like maybe that's like a little expected, and then I remember we met with Franco about it for the first time, and he was like, I kind of want to play the other guy. And we were like, you know what? Like, that is probably more interesting. It gives me a chance to have a bigger role, which is fantastic, and it gave him a chance to do something like totally unexpected.
Hands down, dopest dope I've ever smoked. Right
It's not
here.
better than the Blue Oyster Weed. It can't be.
My friend,
I can't handle better than
this is like if that Blue Oyster shit met that Afghan Kush I had, and they had a baby, and then meanwhile, that crazy Northern Light stuff I had, and the super red espresso snowflake met and had a baby, and by some miracle those two babies met and fucked. This would be the shit that they birthed.
People thought we were really crazy for making that movie at the time. I remember we would tell our friends what we were working on. We were like, we're working on like a weed action comedy. And at the time, that sounded just fucking stupid. Like, I remember people just be like, that sounds stupid. And we were like, yeah, we're trying to make like the not stupid version of it. And we were like, in our heads, trust us, I think it could work. And yeah, this idea of kind of combining, I mean, we were huge like Pulp Fiction fans, so like we really liked the idea of combining kind of like violence and life and death stakes. It's very violent, yeah, which at the time in a comedy also was like not cool and like not something that a lot of people were like expecting to work, and it was not like the best received movie when it came out. Like, it did well, like people liked it, and it's still the movie to this day that if like people by far come up to me the most and tell them that that's their favorite movie of mine. At the time, like, yeah, it was, you know, it did well, but it was not viewed as like a great step in a bold new direction for us, I think. But I viewed it as that. I'm very proud of that movie. I think that movie's just crazy. David Gordon Green directed that, which was a surprising choice at the time. Another thing is, at the time, there was not a lot of like comedies that we were fans of. Like, it was a time when comedies were like super silly and broad and kind of just, we weren't that psyched about what was going on out there. And so we were like, we should look in new directions for directors. Like, and instead of hiring the people who do these like big, like Wedding Crashers, let's hire someone who does like independent movies with like emotional stories that we really like. Because we really knew that was like the most important thing, was like the emotional stories, and that the movies be like a little deeper and a little more resonant than you expect them to be. That was kind of always like the ace we had up our sleeves, we thought, where it's like, yeah, it's cool if it's a weird action movie, but if you actually find yourself like caring about the characters and what's happening to them and their relationship with each other, then like that would be something that no one would expect to happen, you know? And David Gordon Green, I remember our friends, I remember he like All the Real Girls and George Washington were just movies also, like if you were in film school, you were like fucking obsessed with. And he went to film school with Jody Hill and Danny McBride and those guys. And they had made The Foot Fist Way, which was a movie we were huge fans of. And we were just like, oh, these guys. And we watched some of David's early short films, which are batshit fucking crazy, but very funny. And when you meet David, he's very funny. And so we met him and we were like, yeah. I look back and think how like quickly we made that decision and how little like scrutiny we put it through. And it shocks me to this day. Like, I watched George Washington and All the Real Girls. I met him once for 45 minutes and we were like, cool, let's do it. It was an awkward time in comedy. We were a lot younger than a lot of the guys who were acting. It was the time when like Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson, Ben Stiller and those guys were really famous. So like when it came to looking for guys in their 20s to star in comedies, yeah, like you really had to look for new directions. And we thought Franco was funny, but he'd been doing these really serious movies, and we were like, oh, like he's funny, like let's put him in a comedy, you know?
Hello? So, it's Dale. Let me in. I just saw some crazy shit, man. Let me in, please. For the love of God, let me in. It's Dale. Let me in, man. Let me in.
Dale?
Yes, Dale. That's what I said. It's Dale.
I knew he would commit so hard, which he did. And like, what I was surprised by was how like funny we were together, which was nice. Like, I wasn't 100% sure of that.
Oh, man. He fucking killed him, man.
Jeez, I got neighbors.
He fucking killed him.
What? Who killed who?
A cop, a lady, and a guy.
A cop, a lady, and a guy, man. That's like a massacre. You saw it?
No, it was just a guy.
What happened to the lady?
No, a woman. A police woman and a guy, another guy shot another guy, an Asian guy, in the window at fucking Ted's house.
Wow. Was the other guy Ted?
I don't know. He was a big, gray-haired man, and he had a robe, and he fucking took a gun and he shot him, and his brain fucking flew everywhere.
We very quickly fell into like a rhythm where I think we could both feel it was like a good dynamic, yeah.
Shit, I can't see the slushy! Turn on the wipers! It's not working! Well, kick out the window, isn't that what they do? I don't know, how do you drive with one foot? I don't know! Oh, no!
The foot stuck in the windshield joke is still one of, like, of all the jokes we've come up with, is one of my favorite jokes we've come up with.
Oh, shit! Ow! Get it out! Ow! I can't see!
We like it when, especially like action, plays off of your expectation, and there's nothing more fun than when an audience thinks they know what's going to happen, and then they couldn't be more sure, and then something different happens. And with that joke, I mean, it also like informs character. Like, clearly, like, these guys watch a lot of movies. In a movie, if your windshield's shattered, what do? They always kick it out. And the audience knows that as well. They watch a lot of movies, so they couldn't be more sure what's going to happen, because only one thing has ever happened in that scenario. And I remember we thought, oh man, what would probably happen is your foot would just go right through the fucking window, and then you're stuck driving with your foot through a window. And it was, I think, honestly, to this day, it is probably in a movie theater the biggest laugh in any of our movies. Like, I remember seeing, like, I go to all the screenings and we see the movies when they're in the theaters, and like, I think that moment, like, nothing compares to that moment. There's lines in Pineapple Express about how he wants weed to be legalized in the next 5 years, or he's lost all faith in humanity.
Here's my piece. All right. If marijuana is not legal within the next 5 years, I have no faith left in humanity, period.
That was in 2008, I guess, so 2013 was maybe 5 years after that, so a little late. Yeah, Canada has federally legalized cannabis, which is fantastic. and I think a real step in a very progressive direction. And I am one of the owners and founders of a cannabis company called Houseplant, which is currently only available in Canada. One of the reasons for that is because America, although certain states have legal weed, it's still federally illegal, which causes huge problems for tons of people. And I think although America's like inching in the right direction, until they federally legalize it and give amnesty to the people who have been, charged with, reasonable nonviolent crimes during the prohibition of cannabis, then like that's what we need to reach towards, I think. This is the end. In a way, it was weird. It was weird playing Seth Rogen, kind of, but it was very freeing in some ways. What was nice is again, playing off of audience expectation is something we talk a lot about as we write our movies. And what was so nice was making a movie where you kind of knew what everyone was expecting of every character going into it. And we didn't have to there was a version actually, because the studio fucking hated the idea of us playing ourselves. And we just straight up lied to them. And they were like, you have to film a version of the movie where you could maybe cut around the fact that they play themselves. And we were like, sure, no problem. And then we just I remember showing up to set and it just said Seth Rogen painted in huge, the painting on the wall.
Check it out. Painted by myself.
Huh.
Side by side. A team.
Holy shit.
And I was just like, well, this is going to be harder than I thought. And then we actually started writing a version of the script where we don't play ourselves. And it instantly was just like, what the fuck are we then? It took so much out of the fun of the movie. And so we just left it and lied to the studio, and thank God it worked. But yeah, it was fun because... yeah, I think people have this expectation of all of us and of me of being this kind of nice, schlubby guy who's trying to make everyone happy and be liked, and that became the basis for the entire character. And the other thing is it really played into a lot of very real dynamics. Me and Jay, we're very close, and we kind of grew apart once as the years went on, and he did move back to Canada, and I stayed in LA, and he did start coming here and not telling me, and I would find out about it through our other mutual friends. And at the same time, it was things like him and in the movie, him and Jonah, he is mad at Jonah, even though Jonah's trying to be nice to him all the time, which is kind of a thing that would happen.
Talked about a fucking pound of weed and played a bunch of video games.
Weed is tight. Weed is tight. That's awesome.
That's awesome. Weed is awesome.
It's like the golfing sequence in Navy SEALs.
Sick reference though, bro.
Oh, thanks, bud.
Dude, your references are out of control. Everyone knows that.
Hey,
dude.
thanks, man.
It was pretty it was probably more as informed by real life than even people think it is for a movie where we all play ourselves. It got. I remember we sent Jay the first draft and he called us back and was like, "Whoa, you guys really went there, huh?" And we're like, "Yeah, we went all the way there."
Did you direct that film?
Yeah, me and Evan directed.
Was that the film you directed?
Yeah, it was the first movie we directed.
What was that experience like?
It was fun, honestly. It's a technically very complicated movie. There's a lot of visual effects and big set pieces.
I hate it in there. I just want to drink some pop and smoke some weed.
Element of it was complicated, but ultimately fulfilling. Honestly, the reason we directed it is because we were like, no, none of these people will do this if we're not directing it. We couldn't hire someone else to do it. We thought there was no one they would trust enough to kind of hand themselves over in this way, and because I was participating in it as well, it broke down a lot of those barriers too, I think, with the actors, because they were like, well, he's doing it, so I should at least try, and if it doesn't work, I'll tell him to fucking take it out. Yeah, that was really why we directed it, is we were like, we have to. They just won't do this for anybody else. Mindy Kaling's in the movie. I think she falls in the hole, and Rihanna's in the movie, and she falls in a hole. Paul Rudd's in the movie. He crushes the lady's head and then runs away, holding a big bottle of champagne, which is one of my favorite jokes in the movie. Jason Segel's in the movie. He falls in the hole. Kevin Hart. Sorry falls in the hole. Michael Cera dies very early on, in a pretty grim way. Danny McBride becomes a cannibal king and has a sexual gimp plaything, basically.
This is my gimp. Channing, introduce yourself.
Hey, what's up, guys? Y'all cool?
It's Channing Tatum. That's Channing Tatum, dude. What the fuck? Channing fucking Tatum. I found him wandering on the freeway. I collected him, made him my bitch. Get off my dick. I call him Channing Tate Yum.
For almost the entire filming of the movie, we were like, we'll never get a famous person to do this, so we shouldn't even ask someone. And then one day, Jonah was like, I bet Channing Tatum would do it. And I emailed him saying, like, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It is not a forgiving role. You will have to be on your hands and knees for 2 days straight, basically. And you will play Danny McBride's, like, sexual gimp plaything. And within 30 seconds, I got an email back that he was just like, yes, I'm in. Tell me where and when, and I'll do it. And God bless him, he did. The interview. The idea for the interview came from, I mean, I feel like it's almost like this idea that's out there in the ether is like these famous journalists kind of have access to, like, at times, some of the most dangerous people in the world in a way that no military or government could have access.
I interview this guy. Are you joking me, man? He's the most reclusive leader on the planet. It's not gonna happen. He lives in North Korea. We can't go there.
Dave Skylark gets in anywhere. You remember that club? 3-month waiting list. First night.
I don't think it's quite the same thing.
Well, there were a lot of Asian girls there.
And I think a lot of people make the joke of like, oh, why don't they kill that person? And at the same time, you know, we were super fascinated by North Korea, and we started to think this idea of like, you know, Kim Jong-un like inviting kind of like a dumb, egocentric American to North Korea and kind of painting this picture of how wonderful it is and tricking him into kind of expounding the glories of North Korea onto the world was a funny idea. And then it happened in real life with the President of the United States. So, fucking A. I think they hate us because they hate us was improvised, probably.
What is there to be jealous of?
Fuckers hate us because they ain't us.
They hate us because we ain't us? What the fuck does an anus have to do with this?
They hate us because they ain't us.
That's not what it is.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not. They hate us because we is us, and what we is doing is fucking terrible.
They fucking hate us because they ain't
Stop
us.
saying that.
Hate us because they ain't us.
They don't hate us because they ain't us. They don't hate us because they ain't us.
I'm used to it. They hate us because they ain't us.
Stop it. Don't say it again.
Seems like something me and Franco would have just started screaming at each other. But yeah, that of all the things in that movie, that line is really hung on.
Can you tell me about shoving the missile up your butt?
Yeah, there's a scene where I shove a missile up my butt, and that was actually because there's like a tracking device in it, and I don't want them to find it. And then
there are people there. They are closing in on you. They have guns. You need to secure the payload, and you need to secure it in your ass.
Just stick it in your butt. Okay, fine. Fine. I'm there with you, bro.
Just listen to the soothing tones of my voice. Just breathe.
Oh, it's cold. Just let everything go loose. Oh, I don't like it.
The tip is, it's the worst part. Trust me on this.
Inhale as you do it.
Then there's a part where they take me and they strip search me and they have dogs like trying to sniff it out. And arguably the worst thing I've done. But I was the director of the movie also, so I had no one to blame or yell at but myself. We needed the dog to kind of sniff my ass, basically, and it wouldn't. So I essentially had to shove like turkey jerky up my ass to get the dog to like stick its nose in my ass. And I remember there was a guy from like the Humane Society there, because when you ever have animals on set, like, they're there. And I remember turning to him being like, is this okay? And he was like, the dog doesn't mind. I'm amazed you're subjecting yourself to this, but the dog doesn't fucking care. Like, this is not abusive to the dog, but you should really second guess every choice you've made that's led you to this moment.
In that scene, you open up and you shake your
I shake my private parts around. Yeah.
How did you Foley that sound effect? It's so realistic.
It's a dog wagging its head and its tongue flopping around.
Is this what you want? There! You like it? You like it! It's all yours, fuckers!
Stay in the room, American. 가자!
I remember we actually asked the Foley people what... They still Foley movies, which is insane. Like it's the fucking 1913. And they... Yes, that sound is a dog like wagging its face around and its like tongue and lips slapping against its own head. It's funny that I know the answer to that question. Observe and report. I play a guy named Ronnie Barnhart, who is like a bipolar guy who kind of views himself. He kind of has like he's like ego. He's kind of very egocentric and a narcissist, but also very deeply depressed.
I'm here with Ronnie Barnhart, one of the security guards here at the mall, who can hopefully...
You fucked up, ma'am. I'm the head of mall security. You should do that again and say it right.
Well, Officer Barnhart...
Action.
Right. Is there any information you can shed on this situation?
You're just gonna keep going even though you fucked up my title?
He's a mall security guard, and he makes it his mission to catch a flasher. He does catch that man, and he shoots him. The whole end of the movie is me, like, chasing a naked man through a mall in slow motion, and it's, like, pretty remarkable. I remember as we were filming it, I was like, wow, this is crazy. This is a crazy thing to be filming. The movie Paul Blart Mall Cop came out like a few months before and kind of fucked us. We heard rumblings about Paul Blart. And then and then years later I heard that they actually like got the script and ripped us off, even though they're very different movies. Paul Blart made, I think, 6 times the amount of money of Observer Report, though. One way or another, I'm not thrilled with Paul Blart Mall Cop in relation to how Observer Report was received. Steve Jobs. It was weird playing a real person, and it was even weirder that that person was Steve Wozniak.
I don't think there's a man who's done more to advance the democratization that comes with personal computing than I have. But you've never had any respect for me. Now, why is that?
I'd at least consider the possibility that it's because you've never had any for me.
I luckily got to spend a lot of time with him. We became pretty close. I still email with him every now and then. I went out to dinner with him a few times and spent a lot of time with him, and he's a pretty like eccentric dude who has a lot of very specific mannerisms. I remember talking to Danny Boyle a lot about that. I was like, how much of this stuff do you want me to do? And he was like, some of it. One of the best things, though, is I went to the Magic Castle with Steve Wozniak and his wife and my wife, which was a crazy experience because magicians are nerds. And if you're a nerd, there are a few people cooler than fucking Steve Wozniak. And, like, it was like walking in with, like, fucking David Copperfield or something like that. And the funniest part is at the end of the night, he had a Segway that him and his wife came to the Magic Castle on Segways, which they had parked in the parking lot, just leaned against a wall. And I was like, these must be, I was like, I bet you got on the Segway bandwagon pretty early. He's like, these are the first 2 Segways. Like, their serial numbers 1 and 2. And he's like, but the funny thing about that is they don't have headlights, and it was at night. So he reached into a bag and pulled out 2 flashlights and gave one to him and one to his wife. And I literally just saw them segue away down Hollywood Boulevard, like holding flashlights in one hand and segwaying with the other. And I was like, that guy invented personal computers. Long shot. Long shot, I play a journalist named Fred Flarsky who is very opinionated and idealistic to his own fault, and he's very politically minded, or so he thinks, and he was babysat by a woman who's become the Secretary of State and who's running for president, and she hires him as a speechwriter, and he very quickly learns a lot about himself and reconnects with who he used to be.